Thank you again for joining us. We're asking people to please mute your microphones while you're listening to the speakers. And if you would be so kind as to drop your name and where you're joining us from in the chat. We have a wide reach tonight, and it's really exciting to see people joining us from all points. So thank you so much. We're going to be talking tonight about how fracking fuels data centers and protective buffers and how they can make communities safer. Go ahead, Alyssa, if you can advance the slide. I want to thank all of our speakers here tonight. Lauren Posey is joining us from Protect PT. She's an environmental policy advocate. Matt Kelso is the manager of data and technology for the FracTracker Alliance. Courtney Bernhardt is the Director of Research and a colleague of mine from the Environmental Integrity Project. Also joining us from the Environmental Integrity Project is Senior Attorney Lisa Hallowell, and I'm Lisa Graves Marcucci with the Pittsburgh office of the Environmental Integrity Project, and I'm the Pennsylvania Coordinator of Community Outreach. Next, our agenda tonight, we're going to be covering these areas. Lauren will be talking about fracking and how it fuels the data centers. Matt will be talking about the tracking of the build out of the fracking and the data center connection. Data centers and gas plants. Courtney Bernhardt is going to be talking about a recent report that the Environmental Integrity Project published a few weeks ago. Lisa's going to give us some background on our Protective Buffers Coalition and our Protective Buffers campaign, including our petition for rulemaking for an increased setback distance in the state of Pennsylvania. And at the end, we're all going to talk about, I'm going to present some ideas on how we can all work together, taking action over the next few months to try to make a difference. Next slide. Couple housekeeping items. After you've added your name and where you're joining us in the chat, thank you for doing that. Also want to let you know that we're going to hold all the questions till the end. We have built in ample time for Q&A. So if you would add your questions to the chat, my colleague Alice Liu from Clean Air Council is going to help us group those together and share those with folks at the end. And you'll see a number of links in the presentations tonight. And you can either take a screenshot, take a photo, but we also want to let you know that you'll be getting a thank you email from us with some links to those resources to sign up for some things, to participate in some of the actions. We will make sure that you get a copy of those. So you will, have the access to those links that you'll be seeing on the screen tonight. Next slide. Want to introduce my colleague, Lauren Posey, the Environmental Advocate Policy Advocate from Protect PT, and she's going to talk to us about fracking and how it fuels data centers. Lauren?
Thanks, Lisa. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I'll be kicking off our presentation tonight, talking about how the very energy intensive data center boom that we're seeing in Pennsylvania right now is driving increased demand for fracked gas. So I'm with an organization called Protect PT or Protect Penn Trafford. We're a very local nonprofit here in southwestern Pennsylvania, dedicated to protecting the health, economic, environmental, and legal rights of people in Westmoreland and Allegheny counties, especially in regards to the oil and gas industry. Next slide, please. So where is Penn Trafford? Penn Trafford stands for Penn Township and Trafford Borough, two adjacent municipalities in Westmoreland County, which is where our organization was founded, by a group of concerned parents and residents when fracking first began in the area. Next slide. And so this is an image of our interactive fracking map. I believe the link is going to be dropped in the chat for you all in case you want to look around and check it out. It's all of the oil and gas well pads and associated infrastructure in Westmoreland and Allegheny. So it helps you get a real look at, what people in these communities are living next to, especially if you're not from or familiar with the area yourself. And you can see how dense it is. And this will show you not just the well pads, but where they are in relation to things like schools, daycares, recreational facilities. And so And this is also only a one slice of the pie, in terms of what we're looking at here in southwestern Pennsylvania. These are the fracking sites, but it doesn't include things like gas plants, petrochemical facilities, chemical plants, landfills, and other sources of pollution that residents also live near in this region. But it gives you a sense of the industrial activity that's going on and just how close it is to communities. Next slide. Thank you. Awesome. And so these are the types of oil and gas infrastructure that are on that map that you just saw. Well pads, this is where the drilling and the fracking is done. The well pad that you're seeing on screen is the Metis well pad in Penn Township. And then we also have compressor stations. Compressor stations clean, cool, and repressurize the natural gas so that it can keep moving to transmission networks and be prepared to go to market. Transmission networks like pipelines, which you see on screen as well. Compressor stations are usually spaced out in intervals along the pipelines to keep the gas flowing. And we're also concerned with injection wells. We don't have very many injection wells in Pennsylvania currently. Our neighbor Ohio actually has a lot more, but we do have several. This is an image of the injection well in Plum Borough, which is in Westmoreland County. And an injection well, if you're not familiar, it's so fracking, right? They're injecting fluid into the ground at high pressure in order to fracture the shale rock and release trapped natural gas. And that fluid has all sorts of stuff in it. They add things to it to make it more effective at fracturing the rocks, like sand, chemicals, surfactants. And then as it goes down into the earth and comes back up, it also picks up a lot of things along the way. Salts, heavy metals, even radioactivity, just which comes from radium and uranium that are naturally occurring in our geology. But basically, all this fluid comes back up. It's very, very toxic, and there's really no great solution, for what to do with it. So a lot of the liquid is injected back underground, where it is supposed to stay trapped forever. That's not always the case, unfortunately. So these sites are another area of concern of ours. Transportation and disposal of the waste sometimes leads to spills and other incidents that could cause hazard for communities. So those are just some of the infrastructure, that communities in our neck of the woods are living next to and experiencing on a daily basis. Next slide. And so where does this gas go? What's done with it? It does not just stay here, it goes far beyond. Pennsylvania is the second leading energy producing state in our country after Texas. Our total output of natural gas amounts to over 7 trillion cubic feet annually. And this is about 16% of the total US production and 5% of the global production of natural gas. And Pennsylvania actually exports 75% of the gas that we produce. We only use about 25% of it in the state here. So gas from our region goes to other states and even all over the world, even in places where fracking is banned. And so southwestern Pennsylvania has long functioned as an industrial hub for all sorts of industries, and in addition, a public health sacrifice zone. And now it's easy to see these trends and this history repeating itself as our region is being targeted for large-scale data center development, in large part because of the fact that we're a major energy producing state and we already have these industries and this infrastructure in place. So what does data center development mean for our Pennsylvania shale field communities? Well, if the oil and gas industry gets its way, it means more fracking, a lot more fracking. So the energy industry and the data center industry and AI developers, they've really been in lockstep, I think, throughout this process because the energy industry sees a great chance to benefit from data centers and from the increased energy demand that they bring. So Toby Rice, if you're not familiar with him, he is the CEO of EQT Corporation, which is a major natural gas producer in this area. In an interview, he stated that he believes we will need an additional 15 to 18 billion cubic feet per day of natural gas to meet the demand from data centers and other factors that are driving rising energy demand, but largely data centers. And so there's this conference called the Appalachian AI and Energy Conference, which has been occurring annually in Canonsburg, PA, the past few years. It's one of many AI, energy, data center related conferences that we've been seeing in this area. And for last year's conference, they had this statement that you see on the screen up on their website, where they called for an additional 1,800 wells to be built in southwestern Pennsylvania to meet this demand based on Toby Rice's projections. And they made sure to note, don't forget all the pipelines, compressor stations, fractionation capacity, power plants, and electrical substations that would also be needed. The well pads themselves are one piece of the pie, but there's a whole host of other infrastructure that would be needed. We're also seeing increased demand for high voltage transmission lines. We're seeing increased demand for gas power plants, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So it's a pretty staggering amount of new wells, especially in an area that is already so densely fracked. Next slide, please. And so the impacts and concerns, this is something I think that we won't spend too much time on. I'm sure if a lot of you are here, you're probably already interested in the subject of data centers. There's been a lot of conversation about, what the impacts could look like as we see more and more of them be proposed and built. But we'll run over, some of the main concerns in case you're not familiar. Electric grid capacity, of course, does our grid have the capacity to support all of these very energy intensive facilities? If we build these facilities, will the resulting strain, cause blackouts and brownouts? Will ordinary people lose power before the data centers will? These are all very pressing questions. Will it will it cause small businesses and residences' electric rates to go up? What's the accountability there? So that's one side of it, is sort of the energy utility side. Then, if we're looking at, well, where does this energy even come from? That there's a concern with increase in fracking and fossil fuel extraction to fuel this build out, which, there's climate concerns associated with that. For people who live nearby the site, they could be impacted by noise, air, and light pollution. And another thing to note as well is that these data centers are often proposed in like brownfield sites, former industrial sites, places where there's already some sort of, existing infrastructure that makes it easier for them to build. So a lot of these data centers might go into communities that have already experienced health impacts from legacy pollution sources. So there's an environmental justice component as well here. And in terms of air pollution, a lot of these projects, we're seeing them be proposed with gas-fired power plants co-located on site. Many of these data centers will also have a large array of diesel backup generators on site. It's very important for the data center that, it runs 24/7. And so they'll have these generators on site, sometimes hundreds of them, which cause a lot of noise, cause a lot of very concerning noxious pollution as well. And then there's the water piece of it. Data centers consume a lot of water for their cooling systems, and this will add strain to an already strained system in Pennsylvania from fracking operations and other industrial activities. Fracking uses an estimated 10 to 15 million gallons of water per well. So you're looking at water consumption to frack, water consumption to run the gas power plants, and then water consumption as well to cool the data centers. So when you look at the full picture, it's all of these things compounding upon itself to result in very, very large water use. Data centers are now, I believe, in the top 10 water consuming industries in the United States. And then there's also the concern about potential use of PFAS chemicals or forever chemicals in the data center cooling systems and electronic equipment. Currently, companies are not required to report the volume of chemicals that they use or discharge. There's very little regulation in Pennsylvania currently as far as data centers is concerned. A lot has been proposed in our legislature, but not much has made it through so far. So, in terms of all of these concerns, we still don't have, the necessary law to ensure protections. And people are very aware of this. We've seen really robust, really strong united local organizing efforts, both here in southwestern Pennsylvania and across our state and really across the nation. I would say it's a movement at this point. And communities understandably want development that will not negatively impact them. They want economic gains for local people, and oftentimes they don't see what this data center, is going to do for them. They're concerned, is it just going to take resources, from my community? What is it going to give us in return? And extraction without any benefit for the community, that amounts to exploitation. So there's been really strong bipartisan concern in the communities that have had data centers be proposed or speculated. We've seen people come out in really unprecedented numbers, to their local municipal meetings and hearings in order to express their concerns, ask for protections, and, try and get their local governments to make a decision that they believe is in the best interest of the people that they represent. So it's been very powerful to work alongside some of these communities, and to watch them, mobilize and, form a united front together. And so these are all pictures from the Springdale Data Center, Springdale Borough in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, where residents have held numerous actions in opposition and asking for protections from the data center proposed there. And with that, I'll pass it along to Matt.
Thanks, Lauren. We move to the next slide, please. Okay, so I'd like to invite everybody to check out our data centers tracker map. The view that we're looking at right now is focused on Pennsylvania, but the full map is national in scale. So the easiest way to get there is to use your phone to take a picture of that QR code at the bottom right corner of the screen. If you prefer typing in URLs, you can look at that. It's on the screen as well. It's fractracker.org/data-centers and start exploring. So on this map, you'll see that there are multiple categories. The orange pens represent proposed facilities. Green ones are under construction. Red pens are existing facilities that are expanding. Blue pens are operating with no known expansion plans. And then the charcoal gray pens are currently suspended, while you can see a few red circles with a white line through them. Those have been officially canceled. There's also tabs at the top right to highlight resistance efforts, demographics, and environmental data like watershed boundaries. And for some of those tabs, you may want to explore the layers tool, which is at the top left, to see which data layers are available to look at. Next slide, please. Okay, so I have a few abbreviations that I use in here, so I just want to get them out of the way. The first four are different volumes of gas, or different measurements for volumes of gas. MCF is thousands of cubic feet. MMCF is millions of cubic feet. BCF is billion cubic feet. TCF is trillion cubic feet. I also talk about carbon dioxide equivalents, so CO2e for greenhouse gas emissions, and a couple of agencies, EPA, probably most people are familiar with the Environmental Protection Agency, also the EIA, which is the Energy Information Administration. Next slide, please. So the majority of the data center build out will be powered by fracked gas. And, there is the promotional material that you'll see sometimes, like the Homer City site in Indiana County, Pennsylvania, included pictures of solar panels. But as it turns out, there's actually no plans for solar panels there. I guess they just look fancy and futuristic. But here we see a density map of wells, and each dot represents a different number of wells. The dark red dots have more than 100 wells each. And so those are the very dense areas of wells. They're all about 3.5 square kilometers in size. And the thing about it is, though, is that most of the wells in Pennsylvania are conventional wells, while over 99% of the gas in the state comes from unconventional wells. We're going to look at this a little bit closer on the next slide. But still, the visual, I think, is worth keeping in mind, because The data center build out will require a massive expanse of not just the wells, but the pipelines, trucking, water usage, wastewater injection wells, all the things that Lauren was talking about before. And this will allow the industry to pump the gas from where it is safely locked in the ground to the data centers or to the power plants that provide their electricity in some cases. Next slide, please. So this map shows gas production by well in Pennsylvania for 2025. And the magenta dots show the state's 79,000 conventional wells, and the yellow dots are unconventional, and there are about 13,600 of those. In 2025, there were 4 counties with production over 1 trillion cubic feet of gas, including Susquehanna, Bradford, Washington, and Greene. Production from individual wells ranged pretty widely. There was an extreme outlier that produced 12 billion cubic feet of gas, and of course, some of these produced none at all. The northeast and the southwest corners of the state, where you can see these large yellow circles, just happen to be the most productive zones. As a result, there are likely to be the areas where additional extraction efforts will be focused. But there are unconventional wells in 33 different counties in Pennsylvania, so it seems likely that most of these will see some increased activity as well if this data center rollout proceeds as planned. Next slide, please. We have records of about 1.45 million production wells across the US, so obviously Pennsylvania won't support the build out by itself. But as we saw in the last slide, not all wells are created the same. Pennsylvania will be a major player in fueling this data center boom. In 2024, Pennsylvania produced more than 7.4 trillion cubic feet, second only to Texas with about 12.9 TCF. Also, Pennsylvania is geographically close to data center clusters. There's a large cluster in the Metro DC, Northern Virginia area. And there's another cluster in the Atlanta, Georgia area that I'm sure Pennsylvania gas will find its way to as well. And they're, of course, scattered throughout the rest of the country. So you can, if you look on the map that we showed earlier, you can explore that and see where all of these are located. I should note that West Virginia and Ohio are also major producers as well, with almost 5.6 TCF between them. And in all, there are 34 states reporting gas production in 2024, according to the EIA. Next slide, please. We're going to talk a little bit about Toby Rice again. His 18 billion cubic feet per day is the estimate that Lauren mentioned earlier. You multiply that by 365 days, and you get 6.57 trillion cubic feet of gas. This is a very large amount of gas. And I've added that total to the actual gas consumption of the different sectors in the United States from 2024. So you can see this here in purple with this red outline on the text is the new data centers, and all of the other data on there is actual real data of gas consumption from 2024. And so you could see that that purple slice is going to be larger than the green slice, which is residential consumption. So this is all residential consumption of gas, from heating of homes to clothes dryers, water heaters, all of that, cooking. And so it would be about 16.6% of the total gas usage in the United States based off that 2024 data. Next slide, please. So how much gas is that? It's more gas than all of these yellow states produced together. These yellow states produced 5.73 trillion cubic feet. So it's about 3/4 of a trillion feet more than that of gas. And as we saw from the previous map, there are some of these states that are light producers, like Missouri and Nevada. But some of these states, like North Dakota, Wyoming, and Colorado, each produce in excess of 1 trillion cubic feet per year. And this map is really designed to give a sense of the scale of the gas that's at stake here. But in reality, it's probably much more likely that the drillers are going to focus their extraction efforts on these more productive purple states, with Texas and Pennsylvania feeling the brunt of that expanded extraction effort. Next slide, please. So the EPA, somewhat surprisingly, I'd say, still has a carbon dioxide calculator on its website. So we plugged this in, and we can see that this burning this much gas that Toby Rice was talking about would add about 360 million metric tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And that's every year. This amount of gas is equal to the carbon emissions from over 84 million cars on the road, or the total energy usage of about 48 million homes. Earlier, we talked about residential gas consumption, but this is all energy consumption. So this would include not just the heating, but the cooling, hot water heaters, ovens, clothes dryers, people who charge their electric vehicles at home, everything. And so, yeah, let us know in the comments if you anticipate that this might have an impact on residential gas and electric utility costs in your area. It's also the equivalent to the carbon emissions from 942 gas-fired power plants, or typical ones. And essentially, that's what we're talking about here, right? So we're talking about construction of these gas plants on a large scale that are designed for the specific purpose of the data centers. Next slide, please. The EPA calculator also gives us an idea on what it would take to sequester that much atmospheric carbon. So I hope that everybody has a good shovel, because it will take almost 6 billion trees planted every year and left to mature for 10 years to mitigate the carbon footprint of burning all of that gas. Alternatively, a forest the size of Alaska would sequester that much carbon in the atmosphere. But unfortunately, the world's forests are already not enough to offset the current carbon emissions, let alone this addition. In closing, I would like to point out that while I don't know what they're going to do with all of this added compute from all of these data centers, it doesn't seem like solving the environmental and the social and the climate problems that are associated with the build out is very high on their priority list. So I'm hoping that maybe they can focus those machines on solving those problems first. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, I'm Courtney Bernhardt. I'm the Director of Research at the Environmental Integrity Project. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So I'm going to talk about a report that EIP just recently released called The Power Behind AI, and it focuses on a wave of dirty gas-fired power plants that are planned for data centers across the U.S. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. So this report really focuses on power plants that will directly serve data centers behind the meter. That means they won't route electricity through the power grid before providing it to a data center. And you may be asking, why did we just focus on this small number of plants? And that's because there's a lot of momentum to promote this as a solution, which I would argue is a false solution, to quickly power data centers and make our data center and AI industries more competitive. And I don't want to dismiss the fact that there are many, many other gas-fired power plants proposed across the US that will supply the grid and will also connect to the grid, because data centers are demanding that power. So that's another report. But I just want to make sure that we all know what we're talking about here. Next slide. So as of April 30th, we'd identified 74 plants. 71 of them are new, and 3 would be expansions that would directly power data centers. And in total, they're claiming that they could produce up to 143 gigawatts of electricity, and that's a massive amount of power. And here we say that's enough to power the state of California during peak demand nearly 3 times over. I also want to note that EIP continues to track these kinds of plants, and since April 30th, we've identified 20 more. And if you want information about those, you can visit our website at oilandgaswatch.org. And we have data about each plant and downloadable data if you're interested in that. So next slide. So where are these plants? They look strikingly similar to the maps that Matt just showed us and where gas is produced. We've got a large cluster in Texas and a large cluster in Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. We also have several large plants popping up in Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. So these plants are trying to take advantage of nearby gas extraction. And going back to what Lauren said, the emissions from these power plants will fall on folks who are also bearing the burden of legacy pollution and the impacts of oil and gas extraction. Next slide. So our report aimed to estimate the greenhouse gas emissions and health-harming air pollution from these proposed power plants. How did we arrive at these numbers? We have a detailed methodology in the report, but I'll give you the kind of the Cliff Notes version here. First, we relied on permit documents that provide the worst case emission estimates. These are company provided numbers, and they present them in their air permit applications as their potential to emit under the Clean Air Act. We used those numbers where they were available, and they were available for about half the plants we looked at. And for where we didn't have permit documents, we worked with an EIP engineer to calculate emissions using published government emission factors, the generating capacity, the generating technology, and other assumptions about gas heat input to come up with a realistic estimate. Those estimates reflect the possible emissions from running a turbine or an internal combustion engine at full tilt, but they don't include emissions from data center backup generators or other on-site equipment that could also produce emissions. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that, like, we're talking about worst case emissions here in mostly. So actual emissions from these plants will differ from like when they first start and from year to year. Hopefully they're a lot lower, but permit emissions essentially tell us the amount of pollution that our society is allowing them to pollute or allowing them to release in the name of providing power to a data center. So if you're curious about the methodology, you can check it out at the end of the report. But to give you the high notes, the 74 plants that we had identified could emit up to 662 million tons of greenhouse gas pollution per year. And that's almost twice what Matt just said from burning all that gas. And I want to note that this number is based on worst case emission scenarios, and it's from the actual plants that are proposed. I think EPA's emission calculator uses averages. So there are methodological differences out there, and I want you to make sure that you pay attention to those if you're using these numbers. Next slide. So in addition to greenhouse gases, these plants will also emit health-harming air pollution. We estimated that they'll emit a whopping like 159,000 tons of criteria air pollutants like nitrogen oxides, fine particulate matter, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, as well as hazardous air pollutants. So one thing to watch for with these gas-fired power plants is their formaldehyde emissions. It's one of the HAPs that's emitted in the largest quantity from combusting natural gas, no matter where it's burned. So next slide. And okay, so we also took a look at the demographics of some of the communities where these plants are planned. And not surprisingly, most are planned in communities that are already facing poor health outcomes. 62 of the 70 with known locations are in counties where life expectancy is already well below the US average. We identified at least 188 schools within 3 miles of these proposed plants, and about 40% of people living within 3 miles are in low income households. So the burdens of these plants will certainly fall on a large number of vulnerable people. Next slide. So what does this mean for Pennsylvania? So we identified at least 8 behind the meter plants as of this morning. And together they would have a combined capacity of about 14 gigawatts or 14,000 megawatts. They could release a significant amount of air pollution, 67.7 million tons per year of greenhouse gases as carbon dioxide equivalents. Total criteria air pollutants would top 15,000 tons per year, and hazardous air pollutants, mostly formaldehyde, would be around 206 tons per year. So the good news is that only 2 out of the 8 have a final plan approval from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. 6 still need to even submit applications. So there is opportunity for citizens and impacted communities to weigh in on these permitting actions, presumably. So, and I also have a list of the proposed plants here. The largest would be Homer City Generating Station, which is expected to be larger than 4 gigawatts. And then there's one in Westmoreland County, TC Fusion's Keystone Connect Power Plant, and the other one, Shippingport Power Station, and that one, it will be at the site of the former coal plant known as Bruce Mansfield Power Plant, who famously created one of the worst coal ash impoundments in the country. So just anyway, here's this list. So could you go to the next slide? Great. So the report includes 4 case studies, and I'm including a slide for the Homer City Generating Station here. But the report really highlights that this is an issue that is impacting people across the country, not just Pennsylvania, not just Northern Virginia. This industry is using a lot of the same playbook that it has in the past, and I feel like everyone is now facing a sudden crash course in environmental permitting and what they can do to have their voices heard. So this Homer City Generating Station is a great example. Our partners on the ground, Clean Air Council, Penn Future, and Sierra Club have already appealed its air construction permit. And so it's not going unopposed. And there are other examples in the report if you're interested. Next slide. All right, so to close out, our report makes several overarching policy recommendations. We feel strongly that fossil fuels really should not power the technology of the future. And at the very least, if they are going to use fossil fuels, they should absolutely be required to use the best available technology and pollution controls, not antiquated generating technology and inefficient gas turbines. We also argue that government should not be fast tracking any of these approvals. A lot of this is being promoted under the pretense of false urgency, and regulators really need to crack down on companies that are gaming the system by trying to get minor permits that avoid public scrutiny and tighter pollution controls when they should be getting major source permits. And last but not least, communities need a real and meaningful say in the decisions to site these plants and how they may impact their communities. There's really no room for things like non-disclosure agreements or a lack of transparency around these massive sources of air pollution. So anyway, thank you.
Thanks so much, Courtney. I'm Lisa Hallowell. I'm a senior attorney with the Environmental Integrity Project, and I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about the Protective Buffers Coalition, as well as the petition that a couple of our groups presented to the DEP and the Environmental Quality Board asking for minimum setbacks from fracking wells. I have a lot of slides. Thank you. So the Protective Buffers Pennsylvania Coalition formed in 2019 when groups came together to increase minimum setbacks from oil and gas sites to where people live, work, and recreate. We started with a local focus and had some early successes, including securing increased setbacks in Trafford Borough. Next slide, please. In 2020, Governor Shapiro, who was then the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, released the 43rd grand jury report on fracking. And that report confirmed widespread harm that fracking had already caused by that time at the current statutory setback distances, which primarily is a 500-foot setback. This motivated our coalition to seek statewide change. We asked 2 governors, the legislature, and DEP for action, but they did not take any. Slide. In 2024, 2 of the groups in the coalition, the Environmental Integrity Project, which is my organization, and the Clean Air Council, submitted the petition that I mentioned to the Pennsylvania Environmental Quality Board asking for new regulations that would increase buffer distances from fracking sites. I presented a summary of the petition to EQB, which I will actually present shortly in modified form to you all so you can hear what we argued. After much delay, EQB finally accepted our petition for further review by the DEP, and the DEP's report analyzing our petition is expected by the end of this year. Next slide, please. Our petition requests setbacks of 1 kilometer or 3,281 feet from any building or drinking water well, and 1 mile or 5,280 feet from any building that serves a vulnerable population, which would include schools, hospitals, daycares, and nursing homes, etc. And finally, we would also request, or we did request 700-foot, 50 feet setback from any surface water of the Commonwealth. As I said, the current setback distance in Pennsylvania statutes or laws is only 500 feet. So I'm next going to walk you through a slightly modified version of the EQB presentation I gave defending these distances. Slide. I will note at the start, so this was the presentation that I gave in April of 2025. Since we presented this, at least 704 new unconventional or fracking wells have been drilled in Pennsylvania. So in the time that this petition has been sitting with the state decision makers and they have not acted to enact or to adopt new regulations, 704 additional wells have been drilled with, all of the impacts that includes. Next slide, please. Our petition for rulemaking requests greater protective buffers from new unconventional or fracking sites to people's homes, drinking wells, waterways, hospitals, daycares, and schools. Since 2012, 42 independent peer-reviewed studies show fracking at the current setback distances has caused dangerous impacts to health and the environment due to releases of benzene and other harmful fracking pollutants. This proposed regulation is narrowly drafted. It does not seek to ban fracking or relocate existing sites. It only applies to new unconventional oil and gas wells and sets common sense, data-driven protective buffers. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot taken through a bedroom window in Washington County, Pennsylvania. Imagine this was your home. At its core, this petition is about the state ensuring that Pennsylvanians can feel safe in their homes and in this Commonwealth we share. Would you feel assured your health was protected here? Next slide, please. For most Pennsylvanians, their home is the biggest investment they will make. EQB has a mandate to protect the safety and property rights of persons residing in areas where fracking occurs. This is another view from a bedroom window. And you can see in the second image how close the house in this neighborhood is to the edge of the well pad. Next slide, please. This is an image of a daycare center that is approximately 1,046 feet from an unconventional gas well site. If you had to leave your toddler here for 8+ hours per day, would you feel assured that their health was protected? Next slide, please. The Oil and Gas Act, this is kind of a legal slide that we presented, but we wanted to make the argument and we included, it's very small text, but I'm happy to share the language separately with folks. But we wanted to pull out the specific language from some of the laws that govern in the environmental aspects of fracking in Pennsylvania, the Oil and Gas Act, the Clean Streams Law, and the Air Pollution Control Act, to show that they give EQB the authority and the mandate to promulgate regulations to protect health in the environment. The agencies therefore have a duty as well under the Constitution of Pennsylvania to conserve and maintain Pennsylvania resources, which further bolsters this authority. Next slide, please. So as I said, this slide just states again what the distances that we're requesting are and shows another image where you can see how close homes are to a particular well pad. This particular image shows that the closest house is about 830 feet. So again, that is a perfectly acceptable distance under the current law. We don't think that that actually is acceptable based on the health data, and that's what I'll talk about next. So we're asking for data-supported minimum setbacks from new fracking wells. So as I said, we submitted 42 independent peer-reviewed studies that analyzed health impacts from fracking operations. The studies found significant damage at current setback distances. This is just a kind of snippet. We submitted all of the studies, and then this was a chart with kind of a summary of some of the health impacts and some of the distances. If anybody wants to look more deeply at this and needs help finding it, just, we can provide that after. Next slide, please. The harms, so this is just a couple of examples of what some of the studies show. The harms documented are vast, including that children who lived within 1 mile of a well had approximately 5 to 7 times the chance of developing lymphoma compared with those who had no wells within 5 miles. Study after study show that the closer people and water wells are to fracking sites, the worse the documented harm has been. Next slide, please. Pennsylvania had relied upon DEP's what they called the Southwest Short-Term Air Studies to set the current setback distances. That's that 500 feet. But DEP itself has stated in legal filings that these studies did not analyze cancer risks, did not involve any public health officials, and only monitored for less than 1 week, in addition to many other deficiencies. Next slide, please. DEP's air chief, who's still operating there, admitted that the studies that they relied upon were actually designed to serve as planning tools, not standards to protect public health. DEP also admitted that the studies did not make a conclusion as to whether fracking emissions were safe or unsafe, and failed to analyze long-term effects, cumulative effects, or more than a few of the many fracking pollutants. Next slide, please. Don't believe the false narrative that protective buffers would ban fracking. Industry has been drilling 5-mile laterals in practice, and just a few weeks ago actually announced a 7-mile lateral that had been drilled successfully. So requiring new fracking wells to be 1 kilometer from buildings, 750 feet from streams, or even a mile from schools, hospitals, and other vulnerable populations is well within their capabilities and their usual practices, and will not infringe on their ability to reach the gas they seek to extract. Slide. Also, protective buffers would only apply to new wells and would move new fracking sites outside of people's backyards and further away from water wells. Next slide. Pennsylvanians want these common sense setbacks. The petition includes a letter from 28 Pennsylvania health and environmental groups representing hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvania members supporting this petition. We also included signatures from over 2,500 Pennsylvanians demanding protective buffers. And final slide, I believe. So in conclusion, our petition should be granted because it meets all of the requirements that the board needs for moving forward. The 42 independent studies show that fracking at the current setbacks harms Pennsylvanians. The board has a duty and a statutory mandate to protect health and the environment, and the time to act is now. So that was the presentation, or a slightly modified version of the presentation that we made. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I will turn it to the next presenter.
Thank you, Lise. And again, if you have questions, as a number of you have been doing, just drop that in the chat and we will get to those in just a few minutes. Next slide. We really appreciate you joining us here tonight. And the goal here is to find ways to work together, because working together, we can make a difference. Next slide. So for those of you who may not know the story of Cecil Township is in Washington County, Western Pennsylvania. And they allowed a lot of oil and gas infrastructure over the last 15, 20 years. And a year ago, they adopted, in 2024, they adopted new setback distances. And if you recall, Lisa said that the 500 foot is a minimum. It's the floor. It's not the ceiling. So they, based on their experience, they decided that they had done their fair share and they wanted to increase the setback distance. They based the 2,500 foot that they increased their local ordinance setback distance on the 43rd grand jury report. The number one, there were 8 recommendations. The first one was buffer zones, increased setback distances. 3 days later, their state senator introduced a bill in Harrisburg that would penalize any community choosing to increase their setback distance over the 500 foot setback minimum. There's a link to the story there. Now, what that tells me as a lifelong Pennsylvanian is that local communities, even when they tried to protect their communities through the ordinance rules that are allowed here in the Commonwealth, they were going to be penalized. So having the increased distances not only makes sense common sense wise for health protections, but it's necessary because the senator is Camera Bartolotta. To not have your state senator understand that local land use authority is sacrosanct really was very troubling. Next slide. So using our voices, using our coalition, and hopefully inviting all of you who have joined us tonight, we have some ways in which we want to make our voices heard, not only about the data centers and their relationship to the fracking, but we have this report that we're anticipating will come out from the Pennsylvania DEP by the end of the year, as Lisa indicated. And we want to use this time to really let Governor Shapiro and the Pennsylvania DEP know that health protections are key, and it has to start with the fracked well pads, and that will ultimately help many communities in the Commonwealth. So we're having a rally. I'm going to go through some of these individually, but this is the collective. What can you do? Because these are things that are very troubling to many communities in Pennsylvania. And so what can we do together? How can we work together? We're organizing a rally for October 7th in Harrisburg. We have an ongoing postcard campaign, both virtually and actual physical postcards. We're asking you to send virtual text messages and emails to Governor Shapiro. And we want to reach out to local government officials and provide some educational materials to help seek some additional protections through the local support of the increased setback distances. Next slide. We're asking you to mark your calendar for 9:30 a.m. in Harrisburg at the Capitol Rotunda, October 7th. And there's a link there. I want to thank our partners, Food and Water Watch. Megan McDonough, the state director, has already committed to one bus that they will be helping us organize from Western Pennsylvania. And there's a link there that if you are interested, you can also indicate if you want to potentially seek a bus from other parts of the state, you can indicate that in that link. You can either use the QR code or the link to let us know where you would be coming from. Are you interested in joining? And we can work with folks in our coalition to try to get many buses. We'd love to have a whole crowd there. So please mark your calendar, reach out to us. We'd love to help coordinate something for the October 7th rally. Next slide. This image that you saw in Lisa's presentation, this is actually the image that's on our postcard. And the campaign is How Close is Too Close? Protective Buffers Now. Next slide. There are two links here. One is you can send a virtual postcard by visiting our Protective Buffers website. And I also have packets of 25 and 50 postcards, two versions. One is pre-printed with a message, similar to what you heard Lisa describe and what we're asking the governor and the DEP to support in increasing those minimum setback distances. We also have blank ones that if you want to have a postcard writing campaign one night with your group, let me know. I have markers. I have the blank postcards. We have addresses. We want them to go to be addressed to the governor, the lieutenant governor, and Jessica Shirley, who's the secretary of the Pennsylvania DEP. And we're going to collect all of those postcards. You'll get them signed if you're interested in participating in this effort, and then send them back to me. And then we're going to hand deliver those in Harrisburg on October 7th. Next slide. Also, this would be great if governor, this is how you can text the governor. That's the number. He wants to hear from us. Let's let him know that we want his support for increased health-based statewide minimum setback distances. We've never had health-based statewide minimum distances for these protections. It was an arbitrary number that the state came up with. It's not working. We know it's not working, and something has to change. Health has to be made the priority. Or you can email the governor by visiting this link, and all of these links, all of these resources will be on that fact sheet that will be emailed to you in the next few days after we conclude the webinar. Next slide. Here's a sample message. If you say, Lisa, that's great. What do I say to the governor? This is the sample message. You can write this out. You can put it in an email. You can call up his office, however you want to communicate with the governor. We really want people's help to ask him to please, please support this effort. Next slide. And this is the link. We're going to be having a follow-up workshop that will be specific. If you heard in the first slide that I referenced, we're going to have a workshop on how to reach out to local government for their support, how to educate them, let them know about the Protective Buffers campaign, let them know about the story of Cecil Township and how, we really want to make sure that communities who do choose to protect their local residents don't get penalized by a lawmaker. So if you are interested in learning more about how to educate local government officials about this issue and the setback distances that are required for protections from fracked well pads and data centers, please visit that link and sign up. And then we will be getting back to you with the particulars on that particular workshop. Next slide. I've been an organizer. I know this is like really scary that I'm saying this, but I have been an organizer and a community advocate for 30 years. And this is my favorite saying. I have used this, and those of you who've seen me present before, this is my tagline. Shirley Chisholm, who was the first Black female House of Representatives member of Congress, this is how she taught all of us. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And I'm going to talk briefly about how you get that seat at the table. And we're definitely going to be talking more about it when we have that workshop in October, or I'm sorry, in August, in preparation for the October rally. Next slide. So here's how you can use your seat in productive ways. Do your homework. Seek factual information through right to know requests from public files. I know a lot of you are doing that, and that is commendable. That is the way to go. Get the applications for the data centers, get the copy of the ordinances for the local community. That's the rule book. You have to have the rule book. You have to know the documents so that you can fully participate in the public process, meeting with your local officials, attending and building a solid record in the public hearing arena. We'll talk about all of that when we get to that next workshop. Become a trusted factual resource, particularly for local government. A lot of these elected officials, I think you heard Courtney mention it, they're overwhelmed. There's an onslaught of these things coming fast and furious. They know how to do a subdivision for a farm or a pole barn. They don't know how to do these industrial sites. They need our help. We don't want to go in and tar and feather anybody yet, but we want to make sure that we're helping them understand the facts. We want to become trusted factual resources to bring that information to the public and the decision makers. And we want to work collaboratively with you. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. We have lots of folks on the meeting tonight who I know, some of them have been doing this kind of work for years. They know how to do things. We have partner organizations that would be willing to share information, come alongside you, help you in various ways. So next slide. We're all in this together. It is overwhelming. It's very hard and it's very frustrating and very sad and it's very challenging. But we can make a difference. A lot of you are already making a difference and we thank you for that effort. We welcome the opportunity to get to know you and to have the opportunity to network with you. So I look forward to working together and the upcoming events. Have you join us so that our voices become louder and they can't ignore us in Harrisburg. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Alice because we've reached the point in the presentations where we're going to open up the Q&A. So please add your questions in the chat. We will try to answer as many of them as we can. If there are some that are highly technical, we may have to get back to you in writing or we may have to get back to you and follow up individually on certain things, but we will try to get to some of the broader based community questions to start. So Alice, go ahead and help us with that, if you will. Thanks.
Yes, of course. Thank you all for the presentation and thanks for everyone for being just so engaged and active in the chat. I think it's always fun having these kinds of webinars in this style because we get to see people, we get to hear from people, and we get to see what people kind of get up to in the chat. So I do see, I think Matt and Lauren in the chat have been pretty active in responding to some questions. So for the sake of our attendees here who are calling in on a phone or don't have access to the chat, I'm just going to ask Lauren and Matt to go verbally respond to some of these questions too. And I'll start off with John Hurdle's first question in the chat, which is, how credible is this 1,800 additional well count that Toby Rice has? Are there other projections? Where did this number come from? So I think, Matt, you had a good answer to this. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so Toby Rice was quoted, he's the CEO of EQT, which is the largest gas producing company in the United States. And he was quoted saying that there would be an increased demand from 15 to 18 billion cubic feet per day. And somebody else did the math, I think, on the slide that that Lauren showed, using an estimate of 100. I think it was about 100 million cubic feet per day was the estimate that they used, and they based this off of something. I'm not. I think it's close to the average production for Pennsylvania wells, but the location of the well matters a lot. The age of the well matters a lot. And so the actual number of wells that will be drilled is kind of difficult to predict because of those factors. So it could be that if we're talking about a bunch of new wells in very highly productive areas, that the number would be less than that 1,800 wells. And if we're talking about, the equivalent of our conventional oil and gas wells, then the number would be much, much higher. But I don't think anyone's expecting that particular approach because that would be very expensive as well. So yeah, does that answer the question?
I think so. Yeah. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. I see Elaine in the chat here asking if we can please explain how we arrived at 2,500 feet.
That was a number that was part of the then Attorney General Shapiro's 43rd grand jury report. That was a number that we didn't create that number. The now governor did. It's increased from the 500 foot, obviously, and it is a huge step in the right direction. But based on the health studies that we provided, the health professionals didn't have a common number that said this is the magic number. They basically said the greater the distance, the more protective. So that, we didn't come up with a 2,500 foot. That was a direct quote right out of the grand jury report.
Thanks, Lisa.
And I think personally, I think that's why Cecil Township may have used it, because it was referenced in that grand jury report.
Thanks, Lisa.
Mhm.
All right, I'm going to read out a question here from iPhone. I'm very sorry, I don't know your name, but it is showing up as iPhone on Zoom. So if you do want to put your name in the chat, I would love to credit you for this question. But you asked a question that I'm sure is on a lot of our minds, right? Like, we're seeing this proposed data center boom in Pennsylvania. What are the chances that we can stop this? You mentioned that some states have a moratorium, and I think Matt here linked New York's recently passed moratorium, but I just wanted to open it up to Lauren if you wanted to speak more to your answer.
Sure, yeah, I can just reiterate. Yeah, I mean, it's true that we're seeing a lot of speculative data center proposals right now. It's not unheard of sometimes for companies to propose very similar projects in different places and basically just see which one makes it through. And not all of the data center proposals that we're seeing right now may wind up actually being built. Much of the demand for the data centers that we're seeing proposed right now comes from the AI boom, use of language learning models, AI chatbots, and other AI tools. So the long-term fate of these data centers is tied to the fate of the AI industry and the technology industry. So it'll really depend on, I think, how that goes. And people have differing ideas as to whether that's, the new normal or whether it's, some form of bubble that's going to burst. But yeah, here in Pennsylvania, our governor has kind of tried to toe the line between welcoming these data centers and encouraging this development. And, his office has worked with companies like Amazon Web Services to try and speed up and streamline the process of, their data centers being built in the state. At the same time, I think now that there's all of this backlash occurring for data center development, he's becoming increasingly aware of that. And he did come up with his own policy proposal to address the data center issue, his grid principles, which basically would set regulations for data centers that want to claim the tax benefits and fast permitting that Pennsylvania offers. So it's a voluntary opt-in program. If they want these benefits, they have to comply with his set of regulations, which includes things like incorporating some degree of clean energy into how you power your facility, a good faith, attempt to make a community benefits agreement, things like that. A lot of it is very voluntary. You're also supposed to, make an attempt to engage the local workforce and recruit from the local workforce, but it's not a set in stone requirement. So yeah, it would just be a voluntary program for data centers that opt into it, and even some of the requirements aren't really strict requirements. So that is his policy proposal. However, our legislature is introducing many bills. We have many different proposals and attempts to address the impacts, or alternatively, attempts to kind of like lay down the red carpet for the data center industry. There's a bit of both. But yeah, Senator Katie Muth has introduced a 3-year moratorium bill with bipartisan support, but more advocacy is needed to move it forward. It has not, um, been passed through the Senate. It's still there. So I know some of you all might have been aware, maybe even there recently. Food and Water Watch had an event at the Capitol in support of this bill, a very powerful press conference with tons of residents from across the state. So there are efforts ongoing, to work with the legislature and to make policy recommendations for what should be done to protect Pennsylvanians. And there are attempts, to put a moratorium in place in Pennsylvania ongoing. So yeah, it just nothing has quite moved yet, and that's largely due to leadership in the Senate not advancing bills at this time.
Thanks for that, Lauren. Okay, I am gonna now turn to this question on, this is kind of going back to our discussion on setbacks specifically. What regulates a well's lateral drilling, right? Like how might the setbacks that we are proposing interact with the laterals that industry is able to drill? And that's a question from Karen.
I guess I'll take that one. This is Lisa Hallowell. The setbacks that we are proposing are only, of course, one piece of the puzzle. We are hoping to make significant change, and based on the 42 studies that were not done by us, but just done by scientists who are independently reviewing evidence of harm based on fracking that has already occurred. The distances of 1 kilometer and 1 mile were very, in my mind, easily defensible. The risks within those distances were significantly greater than risks further away. That doesn't mean that we think, fracking beyond those distances are safe, or that drilling longer laterals doesn't also need potentially some additional guardrails around it to protect safety. So this is just, again, a piece of the puzzle. And, yeah. There's more that certainly may need to be done once, if and when more evidence comes out of harm.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that, Lisa. All right, taking a look at the questions here. I have a question from Tiffany. Is it true that developers in Pennsylvania are trying to buy farmland to build their data centers? Do protective buffers apply here? What are protections that we can draw from?
So what we talked about with the protective buffers tonight was specific to our petition that's tied to the new fracked well pads. But maybe we should be starting a conversation about something similar from data centers, right? That is something that creating a coalition to work on that is an idea that maybe can come from this meeting. But also, I think what we're going to talk about in the August workshop is how to approach your local government officials to help create an ordinance, if you don't have one, for setback distances and other types of protections from data centers or fracked well pads. There's a lot that the local government has the authority under Pennsylvania law to do. There's something called the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, or the MPC. And those are that's sort of the backbone document that talks about how local governance, especially with regard to land use issues, is to occur. And that's where we've had some success. We've worked with the Food and Water Watch team in a number of communities to help create protective ordinances in Pennsylvania, you must allow for all uses. So you can't ban anything, but you can create protective uh, ways that local land use, that industry has to abide by certain distances. They have to present certain information. You can present your information at a public hearing. You can work with local government. They have a lot of authority, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has underscored that several times. So please, if you have questions about how to approach local government on either the protective buffers petition that's already underway, or talk about data center and seeking additional setback distances there, both locally and at the state level, come to our August workshop. We'll talk about that, and then we'll set up some ongoing meetings where we can talk about how to educate local government officials on their rights and responsibilities. They have the ability to do it. Sometimes they just don't know it.
All right, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And we'll again be following up with links, to register for any of these events we've talked about, links to the resources that we shared in the follow-up email after this presentation. I am now going to ask another question that John asked earlier in the chat. I don't think I saw a response in there, but this is to anyone who might be able to answer this question. But do we have an estimate for how many data centers might be built actually in the state? Yeah, are there any? How much of it is just purely speculative? And is there an estimate that we can look at?
I could say if you look at that FracTracker map well, you may not have the slides in front of you right now, but they'll be available later. There's the screenshot of Pennsylvania, and there are 47 proposed data centers for Pennsylvania, 6 additional ones that are approved or under construction, 2 that have applied for expansion, and I think that is the current list that we have for Pennsylvania. And again, if anybody is aware of more, please visit that site, and there's a form where you can fill out. If we're missing anything, we'd really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Dave, if you are on and if you're able to speak, I would welcome you to unmute and ask your question. I think I didn't quite get the typed version in here, but I would love to have folks answer your question. So if you're here.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I worked with Clean Air Council for 3 years in Pittsburgh, built a database of 6,000 people. We organized groups of 10 to study the issues and take action. There is nothing I see statewide that is bringing this together to make an attack on this. And I've said this from the day I left Clean Air. I don't know how we can move an agenda without a plan to go after the major players in this, the gas and oil, and the payoffs that people are getting for this, all of these projects. I agree with. I think Lisa's brilliant. I've always thought that, and what she brings to the table is how to handle this in between the legal and on the street fight. But this is mostly, I imagine most of the folks here from Western Pennsylvania. You are in this fight. People in the eastern part of the state, I live in Lancaster County, are just like, I don't know what this is all about. What are we supposed to do with it? There are 3 data centers in Lancaster County. No one knew anything about them. There's not the resource like FracTracker does. Matt's doing excellent work. All of you are doing brilliant work and busting your hump to make this happen. But statewide campaign owners, first I feel like we have to get the polls, but to map this out and to lay out steps, and to get people that have done statewide campaigns like a Donna Cooper, who is Rendell's policy director. There are people out there that can do that and work across environmental group lines. I sit in on a Chamber of Commerce meeting in Gibsonia, and three of the gas and oil people were up at the front table, and the guy that was responsible for moving this thing is talking about this like states, uh, we're telling them what to do was the message. And here's where we're going, and this we're not going to be blocked with this. This isn't going to be a problem because we're running all this, and they're eons ahead of us. And I believe there's ways that we, together need to inform the public and continue the pressure on that. And I know probably all of you are burned to the top of your head to your feet with running around fighting this. But I've said to Matt Mihalik and other people in power, I firmly believe a statewide campaign needs to take place that everybody across the state, there's more resistance to this data center than I've seen in anything related to oil and gas so far.
Mhm.
I think it just needs to continue to be exposed, but not just exposed, but to give people the next step
Mhm.
that we need to climb to. And we can keep moving the setbacks for how far away it is. That's not stopping gas and oil. The pollution doesn't stay in one area. I'm with you 100% in this fight, believe me. But my concern's the big picture and what we can do together.
Thank you, Dave. And I think step one was, I believe it was in June, Food and Water Watch took over 100 people on a bus to Harrisburg. That was the beginning, I think, of coalescing a statewide effort on the data centers. There have been a couple webinars. This one is bringing together both groups, the fracking protective buffers, as well as the data centers. And I think we are seeing the beginning of it, Dave. I think what you're talking about is right. And, we're going to I continue to work with the Food and Water Watch team and the Protective Buffers Coalition. And I think having the ability to set things up, like you said, we're going to have a follow-up in August. We're going to talk about reaching out to local governments, try to, get some educational materials to them. But we have to start somewhere. So I think the ball is starting to roll, but I think we're going to need to build on that for sure.
Thank you,
Let me know
Lisa,
how I
for
can
answering
help.
that.
Thank you, Dave.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Appreciate you, Dave.
Lauren's exactly right. Setbacks is just one piece of the puzzle, but we wanted to start there because the grand jury report gave us a number. The governor or the then AG became the governor, and it just made sense. That was a good starting point. So we know there's lots to be done, but we picked that as a starting point, and we are in the thick of it now. We're hoping that by the end of the year, we might have new regulations on the minimum setback distance, which would be a great victory, but still a lot of work to be done. You're right.
Please hear me. I'm not beating up on anyone in this. I was in your seat when this administration came through the first time and about went blind with it. And I know every one of you are doing what you can and probably feeling exhausted with it daily. But I just think it needs to happen quicker and more unified and get to the places where, across the state where there's no reason why, and having talking points that speak to people in different,
Yep.
from different situations or different groups. You're always going to have people have money that are pushing back against this. I just think it's a long, hard fight, and you know that, but one that has to be planned strategically on a
Yep.
day-to-day basis. Thank you.
And that we are working on it. And Lauren, I don't know if you want to mention to people, you do the data centers call, and you're coalescing folks around some planning. You know, there are lots of things going on, but things are happening fast and furious. So I don't know, Lauren, if you want to, do a little shout out for the data center meetings that you hold. There may be some folks attending tonight that would be interested as well.
Sure thing. Yeah, so we do hold monthly statewide data center calls for Pennsylvania. We meet on the first Wednesday of each month at 6 p.m. And it's folks from across the state to get together to, kind of have a solidarity hour in, the site fights that we're all in right now, share updates of what's going on in your community, meet other people who are doing the same thing you are, ask questions, get help, get connected to resources, learn about upcoming events, that sort of thing. So if anyone's interested in joining those, you can just email me. I'll put my email in the chat real quick, and I'm able to add you to like our meeting invitation. And we also have like an email list that you can use to correspond with everyone who's a part of the group. So that's one thing that we're doing. And there's a bunch of other, data center organizing spaces out there as well. So there's no shortage of opportunities to get involved, but the goal of a call like this is to try and get people from different parts of the state who are doing very local work to, come together and all get to know each other and continue to build a more centralized movement. But I definitely agree with you that I think, the data center like resistance and the reaction I think that we've seen from people to this issue has been really, really strong and really unprecedented in some ways. And I think for me, the hope is that, maybe the silver lining of this is that it's an opportunity for us to bring more people into the fold who otherwise wouldn't be here. And I think, connecting the issue of data centers to the issues of fracking and fossil fuel extraction and the issue of climate change and the issue of, political corruption as well, and sort of tying all of those things together, hopefully we'll be able to mobilize a whole lot of people for each one of those issues and, increase people's awareness that this is all interconnected, these things all play into each other, and, drive that statewide change that we would all like to see.
Thank you, Lauren, and thanks for all the hard work everybody's doing in their local communities and in coalitions. And Lauren's exactly right. This is an opportunity to bring everybody together, try to expand our network, and try to share the load because it's big. It's a big, heavy load, but I think we should take a moment to say that, we're gaining some momentum, but we're up against a big challenge. So, Alyssa, can I ask you to just share the last slide of the presentations? It has all the speakers' email addresses on there in case there are folks that have some additional follow-up they'd like to do, or like they want to reach out to Lauren and get the information about the statewide call. I also want to thank Alyssa. She's joining us from Halt the Harm Network. She and Ryan were very instrumental in helping us on getting the platform set up and the registration and all of that. So just definitely want to thank Halt the Harm for helping us. These are the emails for everyone. If you would have a need to reach out, hope that you will see the email that we're going to be sending you over the next few days with all the resources. And if you can mark your calendars for our August workshop, we will be letting you know the date and time of that, but there will be an August workshop as a follow-up to this. Hope that you can join us for that and we can grow our network. So thank you all very, very much for joining us tonight. And we really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to do that. We look forward to ongoing communication with you.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.